The funny thing about karma is that sometimes you get a front row seat to watch it unfold. That's what happened 3 days before my wedding, standing in the lobby of the River Oaks estate, watching my stepmother Patricia's face transform from smug satisfaction to horror as she realized just how badly she miscalculated. But I should start from the beginning. I'm Alexandra Taylor, Alex to my friends, that difficult child to Patricia, and apparently a dangerous, unstable element according to the lies she'd been spreading about me. At 32, I managed the real estate portfolio my grandmother had left me. Though few people knew about my inheritance, I prefer to live simply in my downtown apartment, focusing on building my own success rather than relying on family money. My father married Patricia when I was 12, just 2 years after losing my mom to breast cancer. She swept into our lives like a perfectly coiffed hurricane, all designer clothes and country club manners, immediately starting to improve everything about our home and our lives. Nothing was ever quite good enough, especially me. Alexandra, dear, she'd say, lips pursed in perpetual disappointment, no one will take you seriously if you don't present yourself properly. This could be about anything from my career choice, real estate management instead of law like she wanted, to my clothes, professional but not designer, to my hair, naturally curly instead of chemically straightened like hers. The criticism was constant but subtle, always wrapped in a veneer of concern that made me doubt my own reactions. Was I being too sensitive? Too defensive? Dad was no help. He'd retreat to his study whenever conflict arose, leaving me to navigate Patricia's passive-aggressive warfare alone. Things got worse when my half-sister Melody was born. Melody was everything I wasn't in Patricia's eyes, perfectly graceful, utterly compliant, and completely under her mother's control. While I fought for independence, Melody followed Patricia's life script to the letter, right down to getting engaged to the son of Patricia's best friend from the country club. I'd managed to create some distance over the years, limiting family interactions to major holidays and occasional Sunday dinners. But when I got engaged to Nathan, a brilliant software engineer who'd built his own successful company, I knew the peace wouldn't last. A small wedding would be best, Patricia announced during one of those Sunday dinners, not even bothering to look up from her salad. Nothing too ambitious. We wouldn't want to overshadow Melody's upcoming wedding. I shared a look with Nathan across the table. We'd been planning our wedding for months already. An elegant but intimate affair at River Oaks Estate, a historic property I'd quietly purchased and restored the previous year. Of course, Patricia didn't know that. She just knew it as the most exclusive venue in the city with a 3-year waiting list. Actually, I said, taking a sip of water to hide my smile, we've already booked our venue, River Oaks Estate, this coming Saturday. The fork fell from Patricia's perfectly manicured hands. That's impossible. River Oaks is booked solid for the next 3 years. I tried to reserve it for Melody's wedding and couldn't get in. I shrugged, enjoying her discomfort. We got lucky. That's when the campaign began. First came the calls and texts, Patricia insisting we needed to discuss the wedding plans. When I didn't respond, she started showing up at my office, cornering me in the parking lot to tell me how I was stealing Melody's thunder and being selfish as usual. Melody's been dreaming of a River Oaks wedding since she was a little girl, she pleaded, conveniently forgetting that Melody hadn't even seen the place until last year. How could you do this to your sister? Half-sister, I corrected, instantly regretting the words. Patricia's face hardened, and I knew I'd given her ammunition. This is exactly what I mean, she hissed. You've never accepted Melody as real family. You're still that angry little girl who resents having to share her father's attention. I walked away, but her words followed me. That was Patricia's special talent, finding the soft spots, the old wounds, and pressing on them just hard enough to make them bleed again. The week before the wedding, things escalated. Someone called all our vendors, claiming to be my wedding planner, canceling services we'd booked. Fortunately, I'd anticipated something like this and had warned everyone to only accept changes with written confirmation from me directly. Then gifts started arriving at our apartment, wedding planning books, self-help guides about managing anger issues, and pamphlets about therapy, all sent anonymously, but the message was clear. Patricia was laying groundwork, creating a paper trail to support whatever story she was spinning. Ms. Taylor, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. You should know that a woman claiming to be your stepmother just called. She's trying to cancel your wedding reservation, saying she's concerned about your mental state and potential dangerous behavior. She's threatening to call the police if we don't comply. I close my eyes, counting to 10. Let me guess. She's on her way there now to confirm the cancellation in person? Yes, she said she's coming to sign whatever paperwork is necessary. She seems very determined. A plan formed in my mind. James, here's what we're going to do. I arrived at River Oaks Estate 20 minutes later, parking my car where it wouldn't be immediately visible from the entrance. The property looked particularly beautiful that day, the afternoon sun highlighting the restored Victorian architecture I'd spent so much time and money preserving. Right on schedule, a sleek silver Mercedes pulled up, and Patricia emerged, dressed like she was heading to a board meeting rather than trying to sabotage her stepdaughter's wedding. I watched through the security feed as she strode into the lobby, making a beeline for the front desk where James waited. "I'm Patricia Montgomery," she announced, setting her designer handbag on the counter. "I called earlier about canceling Alexandra Taylor's wedding reservation." James, bless him, played his part perfectly. Yes, Mrs. Montgomery. I've been expecting you, but I'm afraid there seems to be some confusion." "There's no confusion," Patricia cut in. "I'm Alexandra's stepmother, and I'm telling you she's not in a proper state to be getting married. I have documentation." She reached for her bag. "That won't be necessary," James interrupted smoothly. "You see, Mrs. Montgomery, we can't cancel Ms. Taylor's event because, well," he paused for effect, "this is Ms. Taylor's property." The silence that followed was absolute. Patricia's face went through a fascinating series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, dawning horror. That's when I stepped out of the office behind the front desk. "Hello, Patricia," I said calmly. "We need to talk." Part 2. Patricia swayed slightly, her perfectly maintained facade cracking for the first time in 20 years. This is your property." Surprised? I kept my voice level, though my heart was racing. "I've owned River Oaks Estate for over a year. I'm the one who restored it, who turned it into the exclusive venue you so desperately wanted for Melody's wedding." She gripped the counter, her knuckles white. "That's impossible. You could never afford." "My grandmother's inheritance," I cut in. "The one you spent years telling Dad I was too irresponsible to handle. Turns out I'm better at managing money and property than you thought." 20 years of suppressed emotions bubbled to the surface as I watched her process this revelation. How many times had she called me impulsive, unstable, immature? How many times had she whispered in Dad's ear that I needed more guidance and structure? "I have documentation," Patricia repeated weakly, reaching for her bag again. "About your behavior." "You mean the carefully crafted paper trail you've been creating?" I pulled out my phone, opening a folder of screenshots. The anonymous gifts of therapy books, the calls to vendors trying to cancel our services, the emails to the wedding planner suggesting I'm mentally unstable. Her eyes widened. "How did you?" "I learned from you, Patricia. Document everything, right? That's what you always told Melody." I nodded to James, who brought out a thick folder. "We have records of every call you made, every email you sent, every attempt to sabotage this wedding, including your threat to call the police with false claims about me." "I was only trying to protect the family image," she protested, but her voice had lost its usual authority. "Your behavior has always been difficult." "My behavior?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Let's talk about behavior, Patricia. Let's talk about how you've spent 20 years trying to erase every trace of my mother from our lives. How you've manipulated Dad, isolated me, and turned Melody against me." "That's not true." But her protest sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Really?" I pressed a button on my phone, and her voice filled the lobby. "Alexandra's always been jealous of Melody. She's unstable, angry. I'm worried she might do something to ruin the wedding out of spite." Patricia's face drained of color as she recognized the recording. Her conversation with Melody's future mother-in-law at the country club last week. What she didn't know was that Mrs. Bradford, disgusted by Patricia's behavior, had recorded the entire conversation and sent it to me. "I have more," I continued. 20 years worth of more. Every manipulative comment, every subtle dig, every attempt to turn Dad against me. I kept records of everything, Patricia. Just like you taught us. She straightened her spine, trying to regain control. "What do you want? Money? Recognition? I want you to stop." My voice cracked slightly, and I took a deep breath. I want you to understand that you can't control everything and everyone. And I want you to know that if you try to interfere with my wedding or my life again, all of this evidence goes public. How would that affect the family image you're so desperate to protect? You wouldn't dare. But uncertainty flickered in her eyes. Your father will finally see who you really are, I finished. Is that what you're afraid of, Patricia? That Dad will finally understand how you've been manipulating everyone all these years. As if on cue, the lobby doors opened and my father walked in. Patricia spun around, her composure completely shattering. Robert, what are you doing here? Dad looked older than I'd ever seen him, his face lined with a sadness that made my heart ache. I got a call from Caroline Bradford, he said quietly. She was concerned about some things you'd said about Alex. Patricia started to speak, but Dad held up his hand. Don't. Just don't. I've heard enough. He turned to me, his eyes filled with regret. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I should have seen it sooner. Tears pricked at my eyes. Dad, your mother would be so proud of you, he continued, his voice rough with emotion. This place, what you've built, it's amazing. Just like you. Patricia's face hardened. Robert, you can't possibly believe. I believe I've been blind. Dad cut her off. Willfully blind because it was easier than facing the truth. But that ends today. He turned back to me. If you let me, I'd still like to walk you down the aisle on Saturday. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. As for you, Dad faced Patricia. We'll be discussing our future when I get home. If we have one. Patricia fled the lobby, her designer heels clicking rapidly across the marble floor. Through the windows, we watched her Mercedes peel out of the parking lot, leaving only the scent of burnt rubber behind. The wedding took place exactly as planned that Saturday. The historic ballroom of River Oaks Estate glowed with candlelight, filled with people who truly cared about Nathan and me. Melody came, having finally heard the full story of her mother's manipulations. She hugged me before the ceremony, whispering I'm sorry into my ear. Dad walked me down the aisle, both of us teary-eyed. As we passed the front row, I caught a glimpse of an empty seat, Patricia's absence more healing than her presence had ever been. During the reception, I snuck away for a moment, climbing to the estate's rooftop terrace, my favorite spot on the property. The city lights sparkled below as I thought about cycles broken, truths revealed, and bridges both burned and rebuilt. Nathan found me there, wrapping his arms around me from behind. Everything okay? I leaned back against him, watching the stars. You know what? For the first time in 20 years, I think it really is. 2 weeks later, Dad moved out of the house he'd shared with Patricia. 6 months after that, their divorce was finalized. Patricia got her financial settlement, but she lost the one thing she valued most, her carefully crafted image of control. Melody got married the following spring, not at River Oaks Estate, but at a small beachfront ceremony that was entirely her own choice, not her mother's. She's slowly learning to find her own voice, to make decisions without seeking Patricia's approval. As for me, I still run the estate, overseeing other couples' perfect days. Sometimes, late at night, I walk through the restored halls, remembering how it felt to finally stand up to the person who tried to diminish me for so long. There's a new addition to the estate now, a small plaque in the garden next to a rosebush that blooms as wild and free as my mother's used to. It reads, in memory of Elizabeth Taylor, who taught her daughter that the greatest strength lies not in controlling others, but in being true to yourself. Patricia drives past sometimes, slowing down to stare at the estate she once desperately wanted to book. I've heard she tells people at the country club that she let me have it, that it was her idea all along. That's fine. We both know the truth, and nowadays, that's enough for me. Last week, a young bride came to tour the estate. As I showed her around, she mentioned dealing with a difficult mother-in-law who was trying to control every aspect of the wedding. I smiled and shared a piece of wisdom it took me 20 years to learn. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning the battle, but in choosing which battles are worth fighting. And sometimes, just sometimes, the best revenge is living well on your own terms. She got it. I could see it in her eyes, that spark of recognition, of determination. As she left, I watched her walk a little taller, stand a little straighter. That's the real magic of River Oaks Estate, I think. It's not just a venue for weddings. It's a place where people find their strength, their voice, their truth. A place where even the most carefully constructed facades can crumble, revealing something real and beautiful underneath. Like my mother always said, and like Patricia never understood, true class isn't about controlling the narrative. It's about being authentic enough not to need one.